Welcome to the Introverted Misfit podcast with me, Caroline Smith, where we discuss topics related to the human experience of connection and communication with a slightly awkward introverted twist. So, I don't know how many of you listening right now are into gardening, but when I first got into gardening a few years ago, I remember planting my first cucumber plants in these really big 10-gallon containers that I had on my patio in my apartment. And I was so excited to see these cucumbers grow that I literally kept going outside just to check on them and just to look at them like once every 2 hours. No exaggeration. I would go out and check if they needed any more water because the summers get really hot here where I am in the South. And I just was like obsessively checking them. And of course, it was the amount of times that I was checking the plants, it was completely unnecessary and it was unhelpful. It was not making the process go any faster. And I knew that even while I was still doing it. But this is really the concept of today's podcast, of today's episode, which is what I call the myth of quick fixes for every problem in our lives and how we can stop trying to rush the process of life, including especially life's obstacles and trials, and instead learn to trust the process. Or if you're like me and I basically grew up in church all of my life, I've heard people say, God's timing is not our timing. There's probably a million different ways clever ways that you've heard this concept portrayed, but hopefully you get the picture. Someone gave me some advice a few months ago. Actually, not a little bit more than a few months ago. It was early 2024 at this point, but it feels like a few months ago. It has really been sticking in my mind and keeping me motivated all throughout this process of me starting my business. And so I figured that that is a sign that some of you might need to hear this information, which is really the inspiration for today's episode. So when I did first start this coaching business that I have and this podcast, the Introverted Misfit podcast, earlier last year, I had about a 2 hour long conversation with a mentor of mine who is much more experienced in the world of entrepreneurship. She's been doing this for about 7 years, so she knows what she's talking about way more than I do. And she graciously took the time to steer me in the right direction as far as my business is concerned and as far as my podcast is concerned and other things, finances, other advice that she had. And she ended our conversation with just one sentence that I will never forget. She said, "There's just something about your generation that expects everything to happen right away. And it just doesn't work that way. Things like this take time, consistency, and perseverance." And when she was referring to my generation, she's talking about Gen Z or Generation Z, which includes people born between the years of 1997 and 2012. I was born in 1998. I'm 26. And if you don't know, you know how different generations have these nicknames that are given to them based on what is popular at the time or what they're into or what's relevant in their generation. So one popular nickname for Generation Z is Generation Now, which basically is trying to emphasize our preference for things like instant gratification, and really quick fixes for everything, and our general fast-paced nature. And if you ask me, and probably if you ask my parents and any other older person who is a parent of Gen Z, that's a pretty accurate representation of us, which I can humbly admit. And it makes perfect sense because according to my research, we were the first generation in which smartphones and things like social media and instant messaging were a major part of our childhoods. So we are the ones who really grew up, the first generation to have grown up with all of these high-tech advances and basically a computer in our pockets that we have access to this world of information just at our fingertips within seconds. And of course, now pretty much everyone in every generation is sort of used to this instant gratification that smartphones and other technological advances have given us. That includes DoorDash, Amazon, overnight shipping. Um, you don't even have to leave your house to go grocery shopping now. You can hire somebody to do your grocery shopping for you, and you could even talk to them with instant messaging. They can tell you, oh, I'm still waiting in line. The line's really long. Or they can tell you, they're out of this item. Do you want me to get something else? It's just amazing the amount of things that we can just outsource to other people and that we don't have to do ourselves. And it can get done so fast. So instead of taking time to get dressed, get in the car, drive to the store, walk through the aisles, and then stand in that long line and then come back from the store, you can just tap a button on your phone and it can be delivered while you sleep in and just, as soon as you hear the doorbell, you can open the door, bring the groceries in, put them in the refrigerator, and then go back to bed. I'm saying this in so much detail because I've done this before, if you can tell. Um, or if you're anything like me, I don't even think I left my house just last month to go Christmas shopping. Like I did all of it using online shopping. I'm not even kidding, in like 30 minutes. I bought all of my presents and just ordered them online in like less than 30 minutes. Whereas when I was growing up, I remember Christmas shopping used to be a big family ordeal, at least it was for my family, and it was actually kind of fun because my parents and my sisters would put on really warm clothes and then go to the nearest outlet mall, which was about an hour away from where we lived. And for a few hours, we would just walk around the outlet mall and we would buy all of our presents. So they would give me and my sisters an allowance that we could use to buy. And then me and my sisters went one way and went on our adventure. And then my parents went another way on their little adventure. And then we met back at usually the one of the fudge places, like the where they make the fudge and make the candy and stuff. And we would get hot chocolate there. And it was a really fun moment that I remember that's, always going to stick with me. And now we don't have to do that. We can just order it from our phones. So we really are living in what's called a microwave society where everything just happens so fast that you and I are both accustomed to immediate results. And this whole concept reminds me of a saying that my grandma tells me all the time, and that is just keep living and it'll all make sense. She says that to me all of the time. She's 96 years old. And she says it in response to a lot of different things. Like just yesterday, actually, she was at my parents' house yesterday and I saw her. She'll complain about her knees and her back hurting because, again, she's in her 90s. And then she'll say something like, well, I know you don't understand right now because you're still young and healthy, but just keep living. So she says it in response to things like that. But she also says this in response to questions that I have that I want an answer to or things that don't have a quick fix. It's kind of like I forgot the fish's name from Finding Nemo. I think it's not Dorothy, is it? It's the blue fish from Finding Nemo, the one who says, just keep swimming. And, I didn't find out until later in adulthood that what she was talking about in the movie Finding Nemo was really about persevering through hard times. Just keep swimming. So, I think that what my grandma means when she says this, at least what I interpret from it, is that life is for living and learning. So, in other words, experiencing things and events as they happen to us, learning the lessons that need to be learned, and then applying that wisdom moving forward. You're not going to have all of the answers right now, or you're not going to get everything that you want right now in a short time frame. That's not how life works. And in some cases, you may think one way right now, and then something, about something or a topic, and then 10 years later, you've completely changed your mind about that same thing. And you're saying to yourself, what in the world was I thinking back then? Well, I'm kind of in that, I'm at that age, late 20s, where I'm starting to think back on just things that I thought I was so right about. And now I'm just like, I didn't know what I was talking about. So, just to give you an example, I remember being in college, so maybe 20 or 21, and one of my sisters was telling me about a really bad breakup that she had just had with her boyfriend at the time. And keep in mind, there is a 12-year age gap between her and I. So she's a lot more experienced in life than I am. And, at 21, your frontal lobe is not even fully developed yet. It's not fully developed until 25. The frontal lobe is that part of the brain that makes really important decisions for you. I like to call it the common sense part of the brain. That part of the brain is not fully developed. So at that age, I was still very naive about a lot of things. And I remember trying to convince my sister that if both of them really loved each other, they could make it work. And when I told her this, I just remember she looked at me and she just started laughing uncontrollably because she was basically trying to say with her laughter, you have no idea what you're talking about, and you've got a lot more living to do. And then, sure enough, all of these years later, I completely understand why she was laughing so hard at what I said because it took some time. It took some lived experience for me to finally understand that uh that big of a concept that love alone is not enough to make a relationship work. It takes a lot more than that, contrary to what fairy tales have portrayed to us in our childhood movies and stories and everything. So that's one example. Sometimes you can't understand people's true intentions about something until some time has passed, enough time has passed, and then things start to make sense. That's certainly happened to me before too. Or any other situation that you can think of where the puzzle pieces all start to fit together after years of you not knowing the answer. And that's where my grandma's advice comes in. Just keep living and you'll see. And this also reminds me of my past battle with my mental health, which I know a lot of people nowadays are struggling with their mental health for a lot of different reasons. But if you've been following my podcast for a while, you probably heard me talk about my journey of overcoming social anxiety, which is something that I struggled with for many, many years. And by the way, before we get into this portion of the episode, I am not a mental health professional. So what I'm about to tell you is purely my experience and not to be taken as medical advice. But my social anxiety was built up over time, mainly because of some social rejection and social exclusion, but also some outright bullying by kids in my middle school and my high school. And I talk about my experience with being bullied in much more detail in a few of my earlier episodes, but the main one I'm thinking of is titled When Being Bullied as a Kid Makes You an Emotionally Withdrawn Adult. But to give you just a quick summary of what I talk about in that video, I am on the autism spectrum, which that's something that made socializing and making friends really difficult for me. And that's what was causing my social anxiety. And in addition to that, I was also having a lot of cultural estrangement issues with the other Black kids in my school, which that's an entire different story, but I do talk about it in that podcast episode. So you should listen to that one when you're done with this one. So those were the primary reasons that I had so many issues making friends in school. And my journey of overcoming that mental battle was not a quick overnight process. And I've boiled it down. I've boiled what I went through down into a strategy in my 12-week coaching program, which is called Communicate with Quiet Confidence. And it's specifically to transform shy, awkward introverts into becoming socially confident introverts. Which, by the way, if you're interested in that program, the link to that will be in the description of this episode. If you want to learn more about it, and then also book your free discovery call with me to talk about it a little more. But what I was saying is that the strategy and the framework that I use in that program, it really is, when you think about it, it's just you living your life as you normally do, with me guiding and supporting you when you encounter those same issues of low self-esteem, imposter syndrome, social rejection, rejection in general, social awkwardness, all of those things that have been holding you back from transforming into your most socially confident self. And that essentially is what I did on my social confidence journey. I kept living my life as normal, went to work, went to church, went to holiday gatherings, went to the grocery store. But the only difference is that for a period of time, I had to really live with the intention of overcoming my social anxiety. And that was not a quick fix. It was a long-term solution that happened really over the course of a year in some change. And I knew that that long-term solution was going to stick with me for the long run because I was doing all of the work that needed to be done on myself. And if you've been through a similar journey of overcoming a mental battle, you know that once you really do the inner work and you're really invested in it and you connect with yourself, it's going to be a lot harder for you to go back to those old ways because you're going to see the kind of transformation that you have and the kind of benefits that it has. But in essence, I just kept living and I figured it out. Of course, with the help of my family, and I also had some counseling as well. But so now I want to move on to the portion of this episode where I tell you my best advice for how you can stop rushing to figure everything out right now and how you can learn to trust the process without freaking out about every little thing. And hopefully you can apply it to whatever that process looks like for you, whatever trial that you're going through at this time. And I just have 4 points. I was just going through my notes here. I have 4 points to tell you. Number one, very simple one. Remember, good things take time. So if you try to rush through those big obstacles and trials in life, in my experience, it's going to be more difficult to manage them because you're rushing through them. You're taking on more than you can handle, and you're going to end up burnt out. So that's why it's important to find a good pace that works for you and your life. So when I was in middle school, I ran on the cross country team, which, side note, don't ask me to run anything these days because I was a lot more in shape back then when I was on the cross country team and I was on the tennis team and I was always active. It's not that way anymore. But one of the tips that our coach gave us is to not start the race off with a pace that's too fast for you because you're going to tire yourself out and then you're not going to have any energy towards the end when you actually need to speed up and cross the finish line and use the last bit of energy you have to cross the finish line. So what I'm saying is, that age-old saying of life is a marathon, and you have to find a good pace that you can manage. And that's kind of how I think of going through life's trials and obstacles. So that's one example that I came up to share with you. And I've also got another one. So during my first day at my first full-time job as a web developer, I was shadowing one of the more experienced product specialists who he talked to longtime clients that of ours who needed help with the product or had a question or wanted to do a demo of the product if they hadn't already purchased a certain plan. He was one of those people who was really excellent at his job. So like I had no idea that someone could be so motivated and interested in something like construction software, but which is that's the nature of the company I worked for was we sold construction software. And uh he just knew all of the ins and out of everything. That's how it seemed to me. And he was always asking me these very intriguing and thought-provoking questions. And one of the questions that I remember him asking me, it went something like this. What do you think is more dangerous for contractors, our clients? Business growing too fast or business growing too slowly? The correct answer is that growing too fast is very dangerous. Which if you don't know any better like I did, like me at the time, I didn't know any better. That answer sounded absolutely crazy to me because I was like, how can a business grow too fast? Don't you want business to be booming and doesn't more business equal more money? And it turns out, as he explained to me, that is not necessarily true. Because when a business takes on more than it can handle, what happens is the employees get overwhelmed because they don't have the time or the resources to handle that huge influx of clients. And then that leads to the quality of the service going down, which means unhappy customers, a damaged reputation, because of course, unhappy customers talk more than happy ones do, and then ultimately leads to lost profit in your business. So, a business growing too fast, contrary to what might seem uh, more logical to you, is not a good thing. And that taught me, I think, a lot about this concept of the myth of quick fixes. So, the moral of both of these stories is that good things take time to grow. And you just have to remember that tidbit of information when you are in the midst of life's trials and obstacles, achieving your goals, pursuing something. You just have to keep that in mind that it's going to be worth it in the long run, but it's not going to happen overnight. Number two, celebrate the small wins. In my experience, if you're waiting until the final victory or the final result before you start celebrating, it's going to be hard for you to stay motivated and see the progress that you're making along the way. So I think it's important for you to take time and celebrate the small victories of life. So when you pay off that credit card debt that's been keeping you from building up your savings, celebrate it. Even if your final goal is to buy a house or upgrade your car or something like that, celebrate the small victory because you can't get to the final victory without the small ones. When you made a good impression in that work meeting and the boss had really nice things to say about you and applauded you, celebrate that. Even though the pay raise hasn't come yet, that's one step closer to a pay raise, is impressing your boss and showing that you have good ideas and you have knowledge that can help the business. When I was trying to overcome social anxiety, which I kind of already touched on before, I would actually have a mini celebration every time I conquered a fear of a social interaction that I had been through. So, for instance, if I had a conversation in the grocery store with somebody and it went really well, it went a lot better than I expected it to, where I didn't say anything weird, I didn't say anything awkward, I didn't look nervous or jittery, and I feel like I nailed it. I would have an internal happy moment once I got back to the car in the parking lot. It wasn't like a big deal or anything, but I would just kind of like breathe a sigh of relief and just kind of celebrate internally for a few seconds before starting the car and driving off. So my point is the big victories, they don't happen overnight. So you have to learn how to celebrate the small wins so that you can stay positive and stay motivated in pursuit of the final goal. Number three, don't let setbacks derail you. And this is a big one because it can be really easy to let those moments of failure get to you and make you give up. But I encourage you to remember how resilient you are. And I think as humans, we are actually built for overcoming life's trials in some pretty amazing ways. I mean, some pretty, not all of the ways that we find to cope and get over things are amazing, but a lot of them are amazing. So that includes overcoming roadblocks, getting through grieving the death of a loved one, going through sickness, breakups, friendship breakups, and romantic breakups, financial problems, and all of those incredibly stressful things that are just part of the human condition. And I'm not saying that these struggles are fair or that I think that they should happen at all, but the fact is that they do happen. They happen to all of us. If it's not one thing, it'll be another. And humans have been facing issues like these and worse since the beginning of time. And speaking of my grandma's advice, something else my grandma always says is there's nothing new under the sun. So every challenge that you think is unique to you, someone has already gone through it, is going through it right now, and will go through it in the future. So when you start to feel unmotivated by setbacks, remember that this is temporary. And if you can just get through it to see what's on the other side, you will be glad that you did. So, in other words, in the words of my grandmother, just keep living and it'll all make sense. And number four, my final point, have a solid support system. Really, the whole premise of my podcast is just me talking about different topics that are all related to the importance of healthy social and relational skills. Because human connection is one of the primary ways that we thrive in communities. And that's because life is already pretty difficult, but it is 10 times more difficult when you're doing it alone without people who care about you. And when you're going through life's trials and obstacles, your support system really has the ability to keep you motivated when you're discouraged, to support you when you need it, and to help you find your way when you need clarity. So, I've talked a lot on my podcast about how having autism and social anxiety really impacted my ability to create and maintain relationships. And because of that, I didn't have many good friends during my school years, middle school or high school. I definitely had two or three really good friends in high school, specifically from being in concert band and marching band. Sorry, my dog is coming to me for pets right now. Hopefully he's not like breathing into the mic too hard. But the two or three friends that I did have were in concert band and marching band. But the problem was, unless we were in that band class together, I was pretty much helpless and would literally just sit alone all day, not bothering to talk to anyone because I was too scared to talk to, I was too scared to initiate conversations and, of course, engage in conversations. And then, needless to say, my entire 5 years in college, I pretty much didn't make any friends until the last semester of senior year in college, when I did meet two people who I would study with on a regular basis because we were in the same class. And I met a few other people as well in marching band and some other activities that they didn't end up being friends in the moment, but later on after college, after I had become socially confident, I'd end up reconnecting with a few of them, and we're good friends now. But the point is that during that time, I had a lot of trouble maintaining relationships in that way. Um, and after college, for a good 1 to 3 years, depending on which friend I'm talking about, we kind of all went our separate ways and lost touch until, of course, I reconnected with a few of them, which has been really fulfilling for me. But until I was able to confidently build my own support system, which really didn't happen until about 2 years ago, my family was really that primary support system for me, even in my early adulthood when most people have started to branch out and make friends. They were really the main reason that I was able to get through those obstacles in one piece. And I honestly can say, I cannot imagine how much more difficult and demotivating it would have been if I did not have them with me, which really just goes to show you the value of a good support system. When you are going through those trials that don't have a quick fix and that really do take things like perseverance, endurance, accountability, discipline, all of those other big important words that we think of when when going through something difficult. So when you're about to do something really stupid that you know is not good for you, but you're going to do it anyway, you have people who you can call on to help talk you off of that ledge. When you're feeling really disappointed because you didn't get the job interview that you wanted, when things don't work out with that person who you were so convinced that you were in love with, when someone close to you dies and you're grieving. All of these are very normal scenarios in life that we will all have to face one day or another. And I'm telling you, or as you probably already know, you do not want to go through periods of time like that by yourself. That is not fun. So definitely keep those valuable people in your life close to the best of your ability. And if you're anything like I used to be and you're having trouble finding friends and acquaintances because you're shy, socially awkward, maybe you're autistic like I am, make sure to check out my one-on-one coaching services specifically for shy and awkward introverts who want to become socially confident while still being themselves. So that includes my signature 12-week coaching program, which I already touched on, Communicate with Quiet Confidence. Or if you are maybe just, you don't need the entire 12-week program, but there are just one or two things going on in your life right now that are negatively impacting your self-esteem and your social confidence. So maybe you've got some insecurities that you want to get over. Maybe you're dealing with a fear of rejection or sensitivity to rejection that's keeping you from trying to make friends. Maybe you had a really awkward moment with one of your coworkers and you just can't stop playing it over in your head and ruminating about it. If you just have one or two of those sorts of issues, check out my 60-minute social confidence booster, which is really great for me and you addressing those one or two problems that you have in the time span of 1 hour if you just need someone to help you get through those roadblocks. And that is all for today's episode. So I hope that you found a helpful tidbit of information in there somewhere. If you're one of those people who is always just trying to rush through things and just have to have all of the answers right now and just really impatient like I am, like I can be sometimes, let me know if any of the advice in this podcast episode resonated with you by leaving a comment. And if you enjoyed this talk, please don't forget to hit that follow and subscribe button and leave a review or a comment, whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast from. And make sure to share this episode with a friend. Thanks for listening and have a great day.